Hello everyone! Today is going to be a special video because we're jumping all the way back to the roots of Web Dev Simplified and making an HTML and CSS design, which is going to be for a price comparison table. And now this is a bit of a special design because I posted my original design on Twitter and I said, hey, give me any suggestions I can to improve this. I'm going to make a tutorial on it tomorrow. And quite a few people suggested changes. And then one person in particular posted an entire mock-up redesign of it and it looks amazing. So I went through, made all the changes so that our design is going to look just like this mock-up and it's going to be incredibly fun to do. So I can't wait to get started now. Welcome back to Web Dev Simplified. My name's Kyle and my job is to simplify the web for you so you can start building your dream project sooner. So if that sounds interesting, make sure you subscribe to my channel for more videos just like this one. And to get started, as you can see on the right hand side here, I have the incredible design that was supplied to me over Twitter for this price comparison table. And on the left, I have a Visual Studio Code project, which just has two SVG icons, which you can find in the GitHub repo linked in the description, or you can go to Feather Icons, which is where I got these icons from. Now to get started, we obviously need to create an index.html file, and we can just put exclamation point to initialize it with all the default values that we're going to need. Now we can just title this as price comparison table, just like that. And now inside of the body, we need to get started by creating the main section for all of our content to go inside of. So we can just create a section, and we're going to call it here a class of price comparison, because this is going to be holding our price comparison. You can imagine this is going to be a section inside of a larger web application, because obviously just a price application on its own is not very useful. Now, next thing we need to do is create these columns, because this price comparison is going to contain our 3 columns. So let's create these. We're just going to make them divs, and we're going to call them price column, just like that. So now we have a div with the class of price column. You can imagine this left side div here, if I zoom in, this is going to be our main price column we're going to work on. And as you can see inside this price column, we have our heading section, which is going to be this $, text, month, the name of the plan, and then we have a divider, this really light faint line here, you can barely see it, it's a lot more visible on this purple, and then below that all of our features and our button. So inside of here, the first thing that we need to do is we want to create our price header. And this price header is going to contain all of that top information that I talked about. So it's going to have this $, and all of this numbers. So the first thing we're going to have is our price section. And this is going to be this very top 3 numbers up here, this number, $, and the month. So inside of here, we can just have $, and inside of here, obviously we can just put our $. The next thing we're going to have is our number, which in our case is 10. And then lastly, we're going to have the per month. And this is just going to have /MO, as you can see here. Now, if we save that and we open up with live server, you're going to be greeted with a very ugly rendition. There we go. We have this so far, but this is just the HTML. We're just trying to get the shell of our content out before we actually start implementing all of the CSS. Now, the reason that I put this price section inside of its own div is so that we can put it all on the same line, and so we can properly style everything inside of here to look similar. But outside of that div, while still inside of our price header, the next thing we need to do is have the plan name, and the plan name for this one is just going to be basic, just like that. And now this section right here is going to comprise all of our price header information. And before we start moving on to all of the features and the button, I think we should start with the CSS for this and try to break it down piece by piece. So let's create that styles.css right here, and we want to make sure that we include that source here, so link, and we'll do styles.css just like that. One other thing to note is we're actually using 2 Google fonts for this application. We're using Lotto and Poppins. If you go to the Google Fonts website and add Poppins and Lotto font, you can just copy this exact code right here. They'll give it to you on their website and just paste it in, and then you'll have access to both of these fonts for us to use inside of our CSS over here. And now the very first thing I like to do in every single project that I'm working on is to make sure I set the before, the after, and the all content selector to have box sizing of border box. This just makes styling widths and heights of elements so much easier. The next thing I want to do is actually, we were very lucky and had this nice design guide over here telling us all of the different parts of our application. So I want to set up some variables for all of these design elements. The very first thing is our accent color. So we can create a variable called accent color, and we just want to set that here to 641 BFF, just like that. Next thing, this dark color, we don't really need to worry about. It's just black. That's easy to remember. This border light color is only used in one place. We don't need a variable. Same with this background color. But our fonts over here are used in multiple places. So we can have here a heading font family. And this heading font family is going to be Poppins. And we're also going to have here a fallback of sans serif. Serif. Now, as you see over here, it says the body font is SF Pro. I ended up going with Lato because it's on Google Fonts, so it's a lot easier to use. So we're going to create a body font family, which is going to be Lato. And of course, it's going to have a fallback, which is going to be sans serif. Now, if we jump over back to our design right here, we can see exactly what we need to do. And the first thing we want to do is style our body. So if we just select our body here, the first thing we want to do is remove any margin that we have on the body. And we also want to set the background color to this nice faded background color. And if we look here, we have this background color right here. So we can just say that's F8F9FB. And if we save that and go back over here, you see we have that very faint darkish background color. It's just very faint off-white. Now we can go back and start looking at this again. And if I zoom out, you'll notice all of our content is centered inside the page, which is something that I want to do as well. So we can really easily do that by setting the min width to 100 view width, the min height to 100 view height. This means the body will take up the full height and width of our page. Then we can set the display here to flex. We can set the justify content to center and the align items into the center. And now if we look back over here, you see our content is going to be in the dead center of our page. Lastly, all we have left to do is to set our font family. And we want to make sure that's our body font family. And if we do that, you can immediately see our font has changed and it just looks a little bit nicer. Now, in order to continue styling to make this all look good, we need to make sure that we actually have 3 different price columns. So I'm going to copy this price column, paste it down so we have another one, and paste it down so we have one more. And let's look back at what the numbers are going to be. So this last one is going to be 50, and this is for enterprise. And this middle tier one is going to be 20. And it's just, professional, just like that. Now, as you can see, we have all of our different text on the screen. Obviously, it looks terrible, but we have this price comparison class that we can use that's wrapping our columns to actually lay them out side by side. So we can select that price comparison and we can change it to display flex, and immediately our content is going to be lined up side by side. Next, we can just say that we again want this to be in the center. So we'll say justify content center, but this time we're going to align our items stretch. And this is going to make it so that our items are actually going to stretch to fill the same height. So if one of these is shorter than the other one, they'll all stretch out to be the exact same height of each other. Also, we're going to set here a width of 100%, and we're also going to just give a little bit of margin around the sides of 1 rem. And there we go. That's all we need to do for our price comparison. And a lot of these changes are going to come into effect when we start styling our price column. And if you remember right, that is the class that we gave to essentially all of the content in each one of these columns. So this is where we're going to define our background colors, our border radius, all of our spacing. And the first thing that we can do is we can set the background color to white. Because as you remember over here, we have a background color of white around this far left one. And we're focusing mostly on this left side because this is going to be our default price column layout. The next thing we need to do is set up the little bit of shadow that you see around the boxes. We can do that using box shadow. And I actually just copy pasted this directly from the Figma sheet. Essentially, we have 0 outward movement of this. It's just based around the center. And then we have a little bit of blur, a little bit of spread, and it's just really faint, dark-ish color. It's mostly transparent, so you won't really see it too much. But if we look over here, you can see there's just a little bit of a border around here, a little bit of a box shadow that you can see around these elements. It's nothing too harsh, but it's just there. The next thing we need to do is start setting up our spacing and allowing these elements to go away from each other, because right now they're just so pressed up against each other. And we can do that by setting a little bit of padding. We'll say 2 rem. We want to have a nice large amount of space between them. And already you see they're starting to be padded around from each other. Next thing we can do is working on a little bit of our flexbox stuff. So we can say flex grow is going to be 1, and they'll actually grow to be upwards of their maximum size. And in our case, we're going to set a max width of 275 pixels. Now lastly, so that all of these elements are the exact same size, we can set the flex basis to 0. Now that should help make our elements all a similar size to each other. Lastly, we're going to set just a little bit of a border radius around these, just to give them a little bit of a pop from the page. So we'll say border radius and 8 pixels. It also helps our box shadow show a little bit more around these corners. If you remember from our design though, this middle section is purple. So in order to make that middle section purple, let's change this price column, add another class, and we'll just call it popular because this is our most popular design. So what we're going to do is inside of here, we can say .price column .popular, and then we can define different styles. For example, our background color is going to be our accent color. Now if we save that, you can see our background color has turned to that purple. Also, our color inside of here is going to be white, since all of our context inside of here is going to be white text, makes it easier to read. But one thing you will notice is that there's rounded corners on the left and right hand side of these price columns, and it just looks a little bit weird. We want to make it so that they butt right up into this $20 a month professional section. So to do that, we can just say price column first child. And what we want to do, this first child is this one. We want to make the border radius on these borders. So we'll say border top right radius. We're just going to set that to 0. That'll make it so that this corner is no longer rounded. And if we save that, you'll see that corner is now a complete 90-degree angle. And we'll do the exact same thing with the bottom right. Also, we're going to make sure that we do this exact same thing, but with the last child, which is going to be the right-hand side one. So we'll say last child, and except for this time, it's going to be the left and the left, just like that. Now these borders are completely perpendicular, and we can even see that a little bit more if we change our background color of our body to black. You'll see what we've done is we've just made these 90-degree corners over here so that they butt right up against this when we increase the size of this middle section. Let's put that back to its original color, just like that. Now if we go back to our popular design down here, we have a few more changes that we need to make in order to make it pop out from all the other ones. The first thing is we want to do a slightly different box shadow. So I'm just going to copy this straight from the design. You'll notice it's the same box shadow properties up here. It just has a slightly darker color to it with this slightly more opaque. And if we save that, it just has a little bit darker box shadow. It'll make it pop a little bit more from the page. Also, the next thing that we want to do is we want to make it so that this expands past the other designs. As you can see here, we want it to expand above and below. And a really easy trick to do this is to use negative margins. So we'll say margin top, and we'll just set it to -1.5 rem, just like that. And you'll see it expands upwards. But you'll notice the text also expands upward with it. So what we want to do is we want to set the padding on the top to 1.5 rem higher than all of our other ones. You'll notice these ones have 2 rem. So if we set this to 3.5 rem, now our text is exactly where it would be if we didn't have this negative margin at all. We can do the exact same thing, but for bottom. So we'll say margin bottom of 1.5 rem and padding bottom of 3.5 rem, again accounting for this 2 right here. It of course didn't quite move the way we wanted to, and that's because this should be -1.5 rem, and now if I say that, you see it expands above the top and the bottom. And again, if I change this color to black so it's a little bit easier to see, you can see very clearly that this is above these other ones and these ones are right in the center, and that's why we had to make those corners not rounded so they connect right up next to this thing so it looks really nice. Now with all that out of the way, we can finally start working on defining our price heading section here. So if we just move all the way down to the bottom of our code, we created a class and we called it price header. And inside of here is all of our content, $, the 20, the month, as well as the professional. So what we want to do here is we want to change this to be display flex, but we want to keep them above and below each other. So we're going to change the flex direction to column. And this shouldn't change anything at all. And as you can see, nothing in our design has really changed. And the reason for using flexbox is so that we can very easily line these up in the center. So we can just say line items in the center. And as you can see, all of our content has been pushed so that all the text is aligned in the center. Also, since this is for our heading, we want to change the font family to our header font family, just like this. And as you can see, it's increased our font a little bit. It makes it look a little bit nicer. And lastly, everything inside of here should be bold. So we're going to change the font weight to bold and save. And now as you can see, it's already looking more professional. But of course, this section needs to be contained. And we gave that a class of price. And if we just change the display here to flex, immediately everything is going to be shown on the exact same line. And it's already starting to look a lot better. But we of course need to change the sizing of all of our different elements. So the first thing I want to do is change the size of the 20 So we can do that by just setting the font size here to 3.5 rem. Now obviously that's going to affect every single thing inside of our design. So what we want to do is actually select those other things. Firstly, we have our $, and then we also have our other one, which is going to be called here per month. These are the classes that we defined inside of our HTML. You can see $, and per month. And what we want to do is we want to drastically reduce this font size. So for the $, let's just try out 1.5 rem. As you can see, that's moved up to the top. That looks nice, but it's a little bit too high, especially when you compare it over here. So what I want to do is just move it down a little bit. We're going to set a margin on the top, and we'll just say 0.5 rem. And there we go, that's moved it down a little bit. I can zoom this out so it's a little bit easier to see. Also, it's a little bit too close to our 20, so we're going to put a little bit margin on the right, and we'll just say 0.25 rem. And as you can see, now that looks really good, and it's actually really close to our mock-up design over here. Now leading back to this, we definitely need to reduce the size of per month. So we can do that by just selecting this for the font size, and we'll try out here 0.75 rem. As you can see, that's drastically decreased the size, but it's way up high. We need to make sure we justify this at the very bottom. So what we can do is we can say align self flex end, and this is just going to push it all the way down to the bottom, but clearly that doesn't look right. What we want to do is add a little bit of margin on the bottom just to scoot that up. We'll say 1.1 rem, and as you can see, now it's right next to our 20, which looks really good. Also, we want to make this capitalized, so we can say text transform uppercase, and that's going to make our MO going to be uppercase no matter what happens. We can do the exact same thing with our plan name. We can come in here and we can set the text transform to uppercase. And now as you can see, that has changed this to uppercase and it looks a lot better. We can also modify the rest of our plan name while we're here. We can set the font size, which we want to be slightly smaller. We'll do 0.9 rem, because as you can see, this is slightly smaller font size. We can also change it so that our margin on the top is going to be 1 rem, just give us a little bit of space between the price and the plan name. And we don't really want any margin on the bottom. We already have a divider to take care of that, so we'll set the margin on the bottom to 0. Because as you remember, we have this faint line, which is going to take care of the division between the top and the bottom of our design. Now, speaking of that divider, it's actually time to add that into our HTML. We want to do that outside of our price setter, so we're just going to create a div, and we're just going to call it, divider, just like that. And we don't need to put any content inside of this divider. We just want to make sure it's in all 3 of our different price columns. And then we just need to style that. So we can say divider. What we want to do is we want to give it a height of 1 pixel and a width of 100%. This way it's going to take up the full width, but only be 1 pixel tall. And we're full now. Just going to give this a background color of black, just so we can see it. And if we go over here, you can see we have this really harsh black line. Obviously it's pushed up right against our content, which we don't want. So we're going to give it a little bit of a margin on the top of 2 rem, and the same thing on the bottom of 2 rem. And that way it's going to push away from our content, just like it's doing over inside of our mockup. And the reason we're putting the margin on our divider is so that we can evenly space our top content from our bottom content away from the divider. Now the next thing to do is obviously change the color, because black is way too harsh. So what we want to do is actually do a mostly transparent color, which is going to be black. So we're going to use 0, 0, 0. But we want to make it almost entirely transparent, only 10%. And as you can see, it's going to give us a really faint line. Let's bump that up to 20% just so it's easier to see inside the recording. And as you can see, we have that really faint line right there. But obviously our divider here, we want it to be white instead of black. So for our popular column, what we want to do is price column dot popular. What we want to do is we want to specifically select that divider, and we want to change the background color. So we can check the background color, again RGBA, and this time we're going to use white. So 255, 255, 255, and then 0.2 again. And if we save that, you see now we have a white faint line, which looks a lot better than the black did. Now the next thing we have to work on is the most important part of the price comparison, which is going to be all of these different features. And that's where these 2 icons come from. We have the check circle as well as the X square. This is for bad, this is for good. And you'll notice inside of here, the stroke, I actually changed this stroke from the downloaded file to be this specific color. So if you want this specific color for both of these, make sure you download it from the GitHub repo linked in the description below. So now let's go back into our HTML and start adding in these features. And we can just add them directly after our divider. So we can have a feature, And inside of this feature, we're going to have the name of our feature, which in our case, we'll just say feature A. And we also want to have that image. So let's make the first one a good one. So we'll say the source is our check circle SVG, just like that. Let's copy this down for a couple more features. And of course, the indentation didn't work, so let me just fix that. One more here. There we go. And we have feature A, feature B, C, D, E, and let's just do one more for good measure, feature F. Just like that. And on this very last plan, this $50 plan, all of these features are going to be good. They're all going to use the check circle SVG, so we can keep this as is. Now let's copy these features and paste them up into our next one, which is the $20 a month plan. And if we paste these down, save, we can compare what we have so far. As you can see, we have our icons, we have our feature names. It's starting to come together. But one thing we want to do is we want the bottom features to be invalid features. So we can just come in here and say inactive. And we can change this to be our x square, just like that. Same thing with this one, we'll change this to be our x square, and we want it to be inactive. These other features, though, are going to be perfectly fine to keep around. And let's just fix that indentation. Copy this up into our very last $10 a month section here. And again, fix our indentation. And almost all of these are going to be this x square. So let's just copy this up to all of these except for the first two, and make sure that we set them as inactive. There we go. Now if we look, you can see that we have our red X's being shown up, our green check marks, everything is starting to look really good. So let's go over and actually select those. If you remember, we called the class feature. And the main thing we want to do, which I do on almost everything, is change the display to flex, and we want to align these items in the center. This is just going to make it so our icon and our text are actually centered right with each other. And it also has pushed them up right next to each other. To give them a little bit of space between each other, we're going to set the margin to 0.5 rem, just to give us a little bit of vertical space between our elements. And the next thing we can work on is styling our image. So we can say feature, image, and we want to come in here and we want to set the height to 1.1 em, and the width to 1.1 em, just like that. And the reason we're using em instead of rem is that em is going to scale off the font size of our feature. So if we increase our feature font size, our icon also increases. For example, if we change this to 2 rem, you can see our icon scales with it. But if we used rem down here, our icon won't scale. So that's the reason we're using em down here instead of rem. Also, I want to give this a little bit of a margin on the right, because as you can see, it's very pushed up against our stuff. So we'll just say 0.5 rem, and there we go. That looks a lot better. Now the last thing to do is to make these features down here be grayed out and have a line through them. So we'll say our features that are inactive, they're going to have a color here, which is going to be 999, which is just a grayish color. If we come over here, we can see that these turned into this light gray color. And we can also change the text decoration line to line through. And if we save that, you see that draws the line through them, which is perfect. And now we're already getting really close to the end. The last thing we need to do before our button is to add up a most popular section up here. And instead of doing this little button looking thing, I just want to have the text most popular at the very top. So we're in index, let's find our $20 section, which is right here. And inside of our price column, we're just going to create a div, which is called most popular. And inside of here, we're just going to put the text most popular, just like that. As you can see, that showed up there. And what we want to do is actually just absolutely position this. So we want to make sure that we change our price column popular to have here a position of relative. And then if we just scroll all the way to the bottom, we can select our most popular and we can position it absolutely. And now we can just set the, for example, top to 0.5 rem, the left to 0.5 rem, the right to 0.5 rem. And if we save that and make sure we set the text align to center, you can see that it's going to be centered in the very top of our page. Lastly, all we need to do is text transform, because we want this to be all uppercase. We also want the font weight to be bold. And of course, the font family is going to be our header font. So we'll just come in here and select that with our heading font. And if we save that, you can now see that's really standing out and letting users know that this is the plan that they should purchase. Now, all we have left to do is add in this button, the animations for when we hover over it, and this is going to be a ton of fun. So inside of our index, let's just scroll all the way to our very first feature. At the very bottom, all we want to do is create a button with the class, which is going to be CTA, which just stands for call to action. And we'll put in the text start today. Let's copy that button down to all of our different features sections, just like this. And as you can see, we have these incredibly ugly looking buttons. So we should actually start styling these, and we can just select CTA. The first thing we can do is just obviously remove the border. So we'll say border none. And we're going to set the background color to our accent color. So we'll say accent color like this. And this is working great for these buttons on the outside here, because we want them to look like this purple color. And we're going to first focus on our purple color, and then we'll do the white color later. Also, the color inside of here is going to be white for our text, so it's easy to read. And if we look over here, you can see now it's a lot easier to read. Next, we want our button to fill the entire width of our container. So we'll say width is going to be 100%, and we're going to add a little bit of padding to make it look nice. So we'll say 0.75 REM and 1 REM, and already that button looks a lot better and a lot bigger. Also, we can change our cursor to pointer, so when we hover over the button, we know that we can click on it. Now all that's left to do is change the font family. This again is going to be our heading font family. We also want to come in here and change the font weight. We want this to be bold, and we'll give it a little bit of a border radius. So we'll just say 4 pixels, for example, and that looks a lot better already. Lastly, let's move it away from our content. So we'll say margin top is going to be 3 REM. And now it's quite a lot spaced out, so it's right on the bottom, which is exactly what we want. But right now when we hover over it, nothing happens. And I want to give it a really cool kind of animation. It'll pop out at you. So we'll say on hover as well as on focus. What I want to do is I want to take the transform, and I want to take the scale, and I just want to bump it up by 10%, 1.1. Now when I hover, you can see it is bumped up, but it's very jarring. I want to make this a smooth transition, so we can use transition to do that. Whoops, transition, and we can set this to 100 milliseconds. And of course, we just want to make sure we set our default transform in here. So our transform is going to be a scale of 1 by default. And now you see if we hover, it has a really nice smooth animation as it grows into that larger size. And it's really going to catch the eye of our user, hopefully making them buy our product. Now, of course, we want to have a specific call to action for our popular column. So we'll say price column popular for our CTA. And of course, our background color here is going to be white. And we want to have our color of our text to be our accent color. And there we go. We've completely created this design from the design that we have over here. And we have the nice animations on our buttons as well. And that's all it takes to make a price comparison table. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to check out my other videos linked over here and subscribe to the channel for more videos just like this. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.